Emily Carter thought her husband, Jason, was working late until she found a hidden burner phone filled with romantic texts from a woman named Alyssa and a search history that revealed something far darker than an affair. Jason Carter woke up every morning in a neatly arranged home, kissed his wife Emily on the forehead, and drove to work in a spotless sedan. To neighbors and friends, he was the ideal husband, charming, hardworking, and always willing to lend a hand. Emily, his wife of 8 years, was soft-spoken and well-loved in the community. She worked as a first-grade teacher at the local elementary school. People often said they were the kind of couple others looked up to. But beneath their quiet routine and weekend barbecues, something sinister was beginning to stir. Emily had always trusted Jason. He had been her college sweetheart, the man who promised her stability, loyalty, and a peaceful life. She never questioned his long hours at the dealership, the sudden business trips, or the unexplained late-night calls. But something had changed in the last year. Jason had started acting distant. He stopped asking about her day. He no longer made coffee for her in the mornings. His phone was always locked, and he flinched whenever she got near it. The man she once knew seemed to have vanished behind a mask. At first, Emily dismissed her concerns. She thought maybe it was work stress or burnout. She bought him vitamins, planned short getaways, and even suggested marriage counseling. Jason shrugged it all off. Then came the lies, little things at first. He said he was working late, but his car GPS showed a different story. She found receipts in his pockets from restaurants they had never been to. And then there were the clothes, brand new dress shirts and cologne that she had never seen before. Jason was living a life outside their home, and Emily could no longer ignore it. She never confronted him directly. Instead, she became quiet, watchful. She began documenting his patterns, keeping a private log. She tracked his movements through shared apps, snapped photos of suspicious receipts, and collected everything without saying a word. She even followed him one evening when he claimed he had a late meeting. That night changed everything. Jason had driven 30 miles away to a secluded restaurant and met a woman Emily had never seen before. Young, attractive, and clearly infatuated with him. They hugged, held hands, and left together, unaware that Emily sat just a few tables behind them, heart pounding and hands trembling. Emily drove home in silence. She stared at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was shocked, disoriented, but something inside her clicked. She realized her marriage had already ended. It had just taken her too long to admit it. But she wasn't going to let Jason walk away so easily. She began preparing to leave him, but she wanted to do it on her terms. She gathered evidence of the affair, including screenshots of messages she found when Jason left his laptop unlocked one morning. She made digital backups, printed copies, and stored them in a locked drawer at work. She also booked an appointment with a divorce lawyer. She planned to file quietly but powerfully with photos, emails, and financial records. She knew Jason's reputation was everything to him. Once the evidence came out, his image would shatter. He would lose his job, his standing in the community, and likely much of their shared assets. She was tired of living in silence and was ready to reclaim control. She marked the court appointment on her phone, double-checked her documents, and waited for the right day. Jason, however, had begun to notice subtle changes. Emily no longer looked at him the same way. She stopped asking about his whereabouts. She was polite but cold, and once, he caught her watching him with an intensity he couldn't explain. He started going through her things while she was in the shower. He saw legal documents in her bag and printed screenshots of messages he had once deleted. That was when fear crept in. Emily knew everything. And worse, she had evidence. If she filed first, everything he had built would unravel. Jason had never planned on leaving Emily, not because of love, but because divorce was messy. The affair with Alyssa, the young woman he was secretly seeing, had been a way to escape, not a new life plan. But now, Emily had cornered him without saying a word. Jason began to panic. He started searching for options, ways to block a divorce, delay proceedings, hide assets. But nothing offered the kind of clean exit he wanted. Meanwhile, Alyssa had no idea Jason was married. He had told her he was a widower, still healing. She believed every word. Jason used that lie to win her sympathy and her trust. She had just signed a lease on a new apartment, expecting Jason to move in with her by the end of the month. She talked about marriage, children, and a fresh start. Jason, trapped between two lives, felt the pressure closing in. He couldn't keep both lives going forever. And if Emily exposed him, he wouldn't be able to keep even one. So, he made a decision that would change everything. He began to think about how to end it, not just the marriage, but Emily herself. The thought at first disgusted him, but it kept returning, more vivid each time. He began researching late at night, deleting browser histories and using burner devices. He read articles about staged accidents, missing person cases, and undetectable poisons. He didn't tell Alyssa, of course. She remained blissfully unaware of what was brewing behind the smile she adored. As the days passed, Emily prepared her documents. Jason prepared his alibi. She thought she was taking back control. He thought he was escaping judgment. Both of them were wrong. In a quiet neighborhood where people left their doors unlocked and waved to passing cars, no one imagined a murder was being planned. No one noticed the growing distance between Jason and Emily. No one suspected that behind the perfect lawn and the friendly smiles, a deadly storm was gathering, one that would leave the community shattered and the truth buried deep in lies. Jason's double life grew more tangled with each passing day. On the surface, he still played the role of the grieving husband-to-be for Alyssa, the affectionate young woman who had unknowingly walked into the center of a dangerous web. Behind closed doors, he plotted how to erase his wife without leaving a trace. What had started as a casual affair had become something much deeper in Jason's mind, a way out, a fantasy of a new life unburdened by his past, a clean slate he believed he deserved. Alyssa was convinced Jason loved her. She was 26, energetic, and working part-time at a boutique while studying interior design. When Jason walked into her store one afternoon, it felt like a movie. He was confident, well-dressed, and charming. He told her he was a widower, that his wife had died in a car accident a few years ago, and that he had spent the last several years rebuilding his life alone. His lies were detailed and well-practiced. He even fabricated stories of grief and therapy, all designed to make her feel safe with him. Alyssa fell hard. She brought him coffee on his lunch breaks, helped decorate the apartment they would soon share, and told her friends she had finally found someone mature and dependable. Jason played along effortlessly. He told her he was saving money for a wedding, promised they'd travel after her graduation, and encouraged her to look at homes online. Every time Alyssa smiled, Jason saw the life he wanted, a life free from Emily and the secrets threatening to destroy everything. But Emily hadn't stopped watching. Her lawyer had given her a strategy, one that would give her an advantage in court. She needed to stay calm, keep collecting evidence, and avoid tipping Jason off. She had installed a hidden camera in their bedroom, knowing Jason often made calls there late at night. She found texts he had sent Alyssa calling Emily a burden and an obstacle. She saved everything, and then she found something chilling, a calendar reminder Jason had left open by accident. It read, "Weekend getaway, final step." Emily didn't know what it meant, but her instincts screamed danger. She told her sister about the affair and asked her to hold on to the evidence, just in case. She didn't explain everything, but she said she was planning something big and needed to be careful. Her sister urged her to leave the house, stay somewhere safe, but Emily refused. She didn't want Jason to suspect she knew. That week, Jason was colder than usual. He barely spoke to her and left early every morning. He spent his days texting Alyssa and visiting hardware stores, paying cash for items he hoped would never be traced. He bought duct tape, rope, a shovel, and heavy-duty garbage bags. He studied maps of isolated trails near the mountains, places where the earth was soft and the chances of witnesses were low. In his mind, he wasn't committing a murder, he was fixing a mistake, eliminating a threat to his new life. On Friday morning, Jason surprised Emily with an offer. He said he wanted to talk things out and suggested a weekend trip to the woods, just the two of them. He claimed he missed her and wanted to reconnect. Emily was stunned. The invitation felt too convenient, too sudden, but she agreed. If Jason was planning something, she needed to know what. She made a copy of her documents and left them with her sister. Then she packed a small bag and got in the car with the man she no longer recognized. The drive was long and silent. Jason kept his eyes on the road while Emily watched the trees blur past. She noted the direction, counted highway exits, and watched the gas mileage. Her hands trembled, but she kept her face still. They reached the cabin just before sunset. It was small, rustic, and completely isolated. No cell service, no nearby homes, just miles of forest in every direction. Inside, Jason acted normal. He cooked dinner, poured wine, and played music on an old speaker. But Emily noticed the bag he had brought from the trunk. He didn't let her touch it and stored it in the locked shed behind the cabin. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound outside felt threatening. She thought about escaping, but the forest was endless, and she had no way to call for help. The next morning, Jason woke early and insisted they go for a hike. Emily pretended to be excited, but her heart pounded with fear. She slipped a small pair of scissors from the cabin drawer into her pocket, just in case. They walked for almost an hour, deeper into the woods, until Jason suddenly stopped near a clearing. He looked around, took a breath, and then reached into his bag. Emily stepped back slowly, her hand on the scissors in her coat. But before Jason could do anything, a group of distant voices echoed through the trees. A hiking group appeared along the ridge, laughing and taking photos. Jason froze. His plan had been ruined. He smiled tightly and told Emily they should head back. She nodded, but her suspicions had hardened into certainty. He had brought her out here to kill her. They returned to the cabin in silence. That night, Jason pretended everything was fine. Emily played along, but when he fell asleep, she quietly packed her things, took the car keys, and drove off. She didn't go home. She drove straight to her sister's house, locked the doors, and called her lawyer. She had survived for now. Jason woke up alone and panicked. He checked the cabin, the road, and his phone, but she was gone. He drove back to town in a rage. His plan had failed, but he wasn't done. Over the next few days, he pretended nothing had happened. He texted Emily with fake concern, asking where she had gone. Emily never replied. She was filing paperwork, preparing for court, and staying hidden. Jason, desperate and cornered, began thinking of something more permanent, something without witnesses, something that would silence Emily forever. What he didn't know was that her evidence was already in safe hands, and someone else was watching him closely. Jason stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection as if searching for some version of himself that no longer existed. The charming husband, the dependable boyfriend, the successful businessman, those were masks he had worn for years. But now the walls were closing in. Every lie he had told, every step he had taken to rid himself of Emily, was unraveling faster than he could control. He thought he was invisible, untouchable, but the web he spun had begun to tangle around him. Emily had made her move. Her attorney filed for divorce and included an extensive packet of evidence: emails, text messages, call logs, GPS locations, photos, screenshots, and a complete timeline of Jason's suspicious behavior. The documents included details of the cabin trip and even a statement from a hiker who had recognized Jason's car near the forest entrance that weekend. The petition not only cited infidelity, but also outlined credible fear for personal safety. Her lawyer submitted it directly to the court, and a protective order was put in motion. Jason received the notice while at work. His hands trembled as he opened the thick envelope in the back office. Every page felt like a knife. It was all there. His messages to Alyssa, the fake stories, the receipts. It was a complete picture of his deception. But more than that, it showed premeditation. Emily had been watching him closely, and now, someone else would be too. Panic consumed him. He knew this wasn't just a divorce anymore, it was a ticking bomb. If the courts pursued further investigation, the inconsistencies in his story about the cabin weekend would surface. The police might start asking questions. Witnesses might be contacted. Everything he had buried would start clawing its way to the surface. Jason felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear. That night, he returned to Alyssa's apartment, trying to maintain the illusion. She greeted him with a smile, wrapping her arms around him, talking about furniture and dinner plans. But Jason was distracted. His thoughts spun like a cyclone. Every time Alyssa spoke about the future, it made him feel even more trapped. He was living two lives, and both were starting to collapse. He wasn't sure how much longer he could hold it together. Alyssa noticed something was off. She asked if everything was okay, but Jason brushed it off with a tired smile. He told her work was stressful. She believed him, unaware that across town, Detective Ryan Carter was reviewing the documents Emily's lawyer had submitted. The protective order had triggered a report, and that led the police straight to the suspicious details surrounding the cabin weekend. Detective Carter reopened his private file and began compiling new evidence. He contacted the hiker who had seen Jason's car, He interviewed employees at the dealership and learned about Jason's sudden mood swings and time off. He filed a formal request for Jason's credit card and phone records. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Purchases of duct tape, rope, garbage bags, and gloves, calls to obscure numbers, gaps in his timeline, and then the GPS logs clear proof that Jason had returned to the forest after claiming he and Emily had left. With a judge now involved due to the restraining order, Detective Carter received approval for a search warrant. He and his team moved quietly. They searched Jason's car, his apartment, and his devices. What they found stunned them. Jason's old phone had been wiped, but the backup hadn't. A recovered cloud storage file revealed search history that included phrases like how to dispose of a body without trace, staging accidental death, and how long it takes a body to decompose. There were saved maps, coordinates to remote areas, and even notes under a hidden folder titled Reset. One note read, "Make it look like she ran away. No blood, no mess. Remote, controlled." Detective Carter froze as he read the file. This wasn't just a cheating husband. This was a man who had been planning something calculated and sinister. It was clear Emily's instincts had been right all along. The cabin trip hadn't been reconciliation. It had been a setup. That same night, Jason noticed something strange. As he left Alyssa's apartment to grab groceries, he spotted a car parked across the street. It wasn't a neighbor's. The same car appeared 2 days in a row. Then, at the dealership, a man he didn't recognize came in pretending to shop for a car but asked strange questions. Jason's paranoia grew. He began to believe he was being watched, and he was right. Surveillance teams had started monitoring him. They tracked his movements, recorded his interactions, and even followed him to the forest one evening when he attempted to revisit the cabin area. He walked in carrying a backpack, but when he noticed signs of fresh disturbance likely from the previous search, he panicked and turned around. That alone gave police further reason to believe the location held significance. Meanwhile, Alyssa remained in the dark. She was busy planning Jason's birthday celebration and had even invited her parents to meet him. She was preparing a future with a man whose entire life was a manufactured lie. Jason kept up the act because it was his only cover, but each day became harder. He was barely sleeping, constantly checking over his shoulder, and spiraling emotionally. Then came the knock on the door. Early one morning, 2 detectives arrived with a search warrant and a request to speak with Jason. He tried to act surprised, asking what the visit was about, but he was sweating. The officers calmly explained the scope of their inquiry, stating that it involved a missing persons investigation and that he had been listed as a person of interest due to recent court filings. Jason tried to play innocent. He insisted he had no idea what they were talking about, but it didn't matter. The evidence was already too deep. While one detective spoke to him in the living room, another team began searching his laptop, backpack, and drawers. The discovery came quickly: a second burner phone hidden in a showbox with text messages deleted but not fully wiped. Forensics would soon recover enough to tie him to disturbing plans. At the station, Jason was questioned under caution. He denied everything. He claimed the cabin trip was an attempt to fix his marriage. He said Emily left early and refused to tell him where she was going. He said he'd been trying to contact her since, but his voice cracked. The detectives remained calm. They presented his search history, the GPS logs, and the cloud backup file. Jason leaned back, swallowing hard. He knew it was over. The next few days unraveled everything. Police contacted Alyssa. They told her the truth: that Jason wasn't a widower, that he was still married, and that he was under investigation for attempted murder. Her world collapsed in an instant. She cooperated with the police, handing over texts, photos, and everything Jason had ever given her. She was devastated and angry, but most of all, she was terrified that she had loved a man capable of something so dark. Jason was charged with attempted murder, criminal harassment, and obstruction of justice. But investigators weren't done. They believed Jason hadn't just planned to kill Emily. They believed he still intended to finish what he started. The case was now fully active. The evidence was piling up, and all that was missing was a confession or a body. Jason sat in his car outside Alyssa's apartment, staring blankly at the dashboard. The failed weekend at the cabin had shaken him. He had planned everything so carefully: every route, every excuse, every detail. But the unexpected arrival of hikers had ruined it all. Now Emily was gone, and she wasn't answering his messages or returning home. He didn't know where she was, and that terrified him more than anything. She had all the proof, all the documents, and she had clearly realized what he was trying to do. That meant she had the upper hand. And if she went to the police, everything would fall apart. Alyssa opened the door and smiled, unaware of the storm behind Jason's eyes. He stepped into the warm apartment she had decorated just for them, the one he had promised to move into once everything was finalized. She still believed he was trying to get over the pain of a wife who died years ago. She was already calling herself his fiancée and had told her parents they'd likely be engaged by the end of the year. Jason played along, smiling when needed, acting loving when she expected it, but his mind was elsewhere. Back at Emily's sister's house, Emily was meeting with her lawyer again. She had told him everything: the trip, the bag Jason brought, the suspicious behavior, and the gut feeling she'd had since the beginning. Her lawyer was alarmed and advised her to consider contacting the authorities. But Emily hesitated. She wanted a solid legal win. She wanted Jason exposed not just as a cheater, but as a manipulator who would go to deadly lengths to protect his reputation. Meanwhile, Jason began plotting again. This time, he decided not to rely on location or wilderness. He needed something faster, more discreet. He started researching poisons, sedatives, and ways to stage an accidental overdose. He searched for methods used in unsolved cases, reading forums and obscure articles late into the night. He deleted his history and used public Wi-Fi. He paid cash at different stores. His plan had to be perfect. Jason reached out to Emily a few more times, sending carefully worded texts. He said he was sorry, that he just wanted to talk. Emily didn't respond. He left voicemails, faking concern. But Emily had already blocked him and given her lawyer access to every message. The more Jason tried to contact her, the deeper the hole he was digging. And now, someone else was beginning to take notice. Detective Ryan Carter, not related to Jason, worked in the missing persons unit but occasionally reviewed cold cases and suspicious behavior patterns. When a former co-worker mentioned that a local woman had recently gone off the grid after a tense relationship with her husband, he quietly opened an unofficial file. He didn't have enough for an official investigation, but something felt off. He pulled Jason's background, employment history, and marriage records. Everything seemed clean to clean. Jason, meanwhile, prepared his next attempt. He called Emily from a burner phone and left a voicemail claiming he had documents she might want to see before the divorce. He suggested meeting at a nearby coffee shop. Emily refused, instead forwarding the voicemail to her attorney. Jason was growing desperate. He believed Emily might file police reports or expose him to Alyssa. He couldn't let that happen. The more pressure he felt, the more reckless his thoughts became. One evening, Jason told Alyssa he had to work late, then drove 2 hours out of town to purchase untraceable tools, latex gloves, plastic sheeting, cleaning supplies, and a second prepaid phone. His plan was becoming clearer in his mind. This time, there would be no mistakes, no hikers, no evidence. He decided he would stage a break-in or make it look like Emily had overdosed. But the truth was, he was running out of time. Emily's lawyer was preparing to file charges related to harassment and attempted harm. Jason wasn't aware of the growing number of eyes on him. Detective Carter had quietly reached out to a contact at the dealership and asked a few harmless questions. What he learned surprised him. Jason had recently requested time off for an unknown emergency. He also discovered Jason had withdrawn a large sum of cash from a joint bank account shortly before Emily vanished for several days. There was no formal report of a missing person, but the patterns were beginning to emerge. Then came the biggest mistake Jason made. He followed Emily. One evening, believing she was alone and vulnerable, Jason tracked her from her sister's house to a bookstore. He parked several spots down and waited, watching her every move. He was ready to follow her home, thinking he might finally have the chance to strike. But he didn't realize her lawyer had advised her to be cautious. Emily had already informed her sister about the possibility of being followed, and her sister had told a friend on the police force. A plainclothes officer was watching that night. When Jason pulled out of the parking lot behind Emily's car, another car pulled out behind him. It followed at a distance, careful and quiet. Jason had no idea he was now being monitored. The officer made note of his route, speed, and how closely he followed Emily. Once Jason turned away, the officer called in the activity. It wasn't enough to arrest him, but it was enough to flag his behavior. A formal investigation could now be opened. Jason, thinking he was still in control, returned to Alyssa's apartment and kissed her goodnight, all while his mind raced. He believed he was close to achieving his goal. But what he didn't know was that a new file had been created under his name, and it was growing rapidly with each passing day. Emily, on the other hand, remained careful. She kept her movements random, avoided routines, and stayed in touch with her attorney daily. Her evidence folder now included Jason's voicemails, screenshots of his disturbing messages, and a record of the cabin trip. She was close to filing not just for divorce, but for full criminal charges. She just needed one more thing: proof that Jason wasn't just unfaithful, but dangerous. Jason was spiraling. He felt trapped in every direction. Emily had outmaneuvered him. Alyssa was expecting a future he couldn't deliver, and now strange cars occasionally passed by slowly near his work. He began to suspect something was happening. He just didn't know how close the trap had become. And the moment he made his next move, it would all come crashing down. The courtroom was silent as Jason Carter was escorted to the defendant's table, dressed in a gray suit that hung loosely from his tense frame. His eyes were hollow, locked on the floor as murmurs echoed across the room. The trial had drawn attention not just because of the nature of the charges, but because of the portrait that had emerged of a man who had lived a double-life: husband, lover, liar, and predator. The prosecution presented its case with brutal precision. There was no body, but there was enough circumstantial evidence to piece together a chilling timeline. The affair, the lies, the fake stories to Alyssa, the cabin trip, the search histories, the items purchased with cash, each detail carefully painted a picture of intention. Jason hadn't simply wanted to end his marriage. He had methodically planned the disappearance or death of his wife. Emily, still alive and sitting in the courtroom, watched him with a hardened expression. She had survived not just physically, but emotionally. The woman who once doubted her instincts had become the one to expose a calculated, almost perfect crime before it was completed. Her testimony was firm and composed. She recounted the shift in Jason's behavior, the suspicious purchases, the ominous weekend in the woods, and the way he had stalked her afterward. She never broke down. She didn't flinch when the defense tried to portray her as overly suspicious. She had come prepared. Then came Alyssa's turn. The woman who had once imagined a life with Jason now sat across from him, her voice unsteady but her words sharp. She described how she met him, the lies he told about being a widower, the way he spoke about Emily as someone from his past, and how he made future plans with her while still married. She sobbed briefly when recounting how she learned the truth from detectives, how she realized she had been unknowingly living in the center of a murder plot. The defense struggled to explain the evidence. Jason's lawyer claimed the cabin trip was a failed attempt at reconciliation. He argued that the search history was out of curiosity and frustration, not proof of intent. He said Jason was a man broken by emotional pressure, not a killer in disguise. But the jury wasn't convinced. Not after hearing the recorded voicemails, reading the backup files from Jason's cloud account, and seeing photos of the items found in his car. Detective Ryan Carter took the stand and walked the court through the investigation. He explained how the protective order had triggered an official inquiry, how Jason had been tracked and watched, and how his actions fit the profile of someone planning a staged disappearance. He showed the court the GPS pings leading to remote forest coordinates, the digital footprints of deleted folders, and the surveillance footage of Jason purchasing cleaning supplies and tools while claiming to be at work. Jason remained mostly still throughout the trial. He didn't testify. He didn't look at Emily or Alyssa. Occasionally, he whispered to his attorney, but even that became rare by the final week. His silence became another piece of the puzzle, another suggestion that he had no real defense. After 10 days of testimony and cross-examinations, the case was handed to the jury. They deliberated for only a few hours before returning with their verdict: guilty. The courtroom remained frozen for a moment. Jason lowered his head, then lifted it slightly and looked toward the gallery. His eyes briefly met Emily's, but she didn't look away. The judge listed the charges: attempted murder, criminal harassment, obstruction of justice, and stalking. Then came the sentence: life imprisonment with no chance of parole for 25 years. Emily exhaled slowly, her shoulders finally relaxing. The man who had once shared her home, her dreams, and her trust would now spend decades behind bars. Justice hadn't brought closure, but it brought protection. And that, for her, was enough. Alyssa left the courtroom with tears in her eyes, her parents at her side. She had believed in a future with someone who had deceived her on every level. Her heartbreak would take years to heal, but her cooperation had helped ensure that Jason couldn't hurt anyone else again. In the aftermath, the story spread throughout the town. Neighbors who once admired Jason now avoided saying his name. Former coworkers deleted old photos and distanced themselves from the memory of who he used to be. The dealership where he worked issued a statement expressing shock and horror. And the cabin where he had tried to make his move was quietly sold, left abandoned by its former owner. Emily eventually returned to her classroom. But things were different. She kept her personal life private and trusted very few people. Her sister remained her closest support, and her lawyer stayed in touch regularly. She often spoke to groups of women about warning signs in toxic relationships, not just about infidelity, but about manipulation, surveillance, and control disguised as affection. Detective Carter moved on to other cases, but Jason Carter's file remained on his desk for a long time. He had worked many investigations, but this one stayed with him. It wasn't just about catching a criminal. It was about stopping a tragedy before it became permanent. It was about listening to instincts, reading between the lines, and giving weight to things others often dismiss. As for Jason, he was transferred to a maximum security prison. There, he remained mostly quiet, avoided by others, and spent most of his time alone. He never appealed the sentence. He never gave an interview. The man who once thrived on control now had none. His world had shrunk to a concrete cell and silence. No wife, no lover, no mask. The story became a chilling reminder that danger doesn't always come from strangers in the dark. Sometimes it lives behind smiles and familiar faces. Sometimes it shares your bed, your dinner table, and your dreams. And sometimes it stopped just in time.